Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you again for returning to our last featured session of the conference. We were excited that Monday we got to hear from Anthony Abraham Jack and his book and research, The Privileged Poor. It reminded us of the disparities in support that our students need, not only on our college campuses, but support on our high school campuses as well. Yesterday, we were able to hear from leadership consultant Nicole Pinkham, who reminded us to lean into the hard conversations and the hard topics, but that choosing is an intentional decision that we get to make. And today, really excited to hear from our own. You have heard from Jonathan Ferrell, president of SACAC, or as of 30 minutes ago, past president of SACAC, and also pleased to welcome today Angel Perez. Angel is the new CEO of NACAC. He started in July. So for those of you that have started a new job during a pandemic, he can relate to that with you as well. They are sharing what appears to be themes from Monday and Tuesday in this entire conference, and it's leadership through double pandemics of COVID and race. So I thank them for their time today and look forward to hearing their remarks. I will turn it over to Angel and Jonathan.
Thank you so much, Tyler. So I am, a few minutes into past presidency, and I feel lighter right now. So
already doesn't take long.
Already feel lighter. I know, already feel lighter. So I am. So I guess I want to preface this by saying a couple of things. One, that Angel and I are actually friends in real life, and we have the kinds of topics and conversations that we're going to have here today are the kinds of things we actually talk about in our, in real life. And so this is in many ways just a normal kind of conversation between the two of us that we happen to have an audience to. We have these sometimes at annual conferences, and we usually have them sometimes at a bar. So we were talking about, we're kind of missing that, but I have my sparkling water here. He has his water there. So we'll have this conversation. So again, this is going to be the topic. The broader topic is leading, really in the midst of two pandemics that we would call race relations and COVID. We also understand that today, many people are showing up here today feeling lots of different ways based on yesterday's verdict. And so, certainly timely that we would talk about, race and COVID today. So we'll just kind of jump right in, have a conversation. We have Diana, who is going to be handling Q&A. So we certainly want to leave some time for Q&A and take some of your questions. And so we'll tell you later when we're going to take some questions and hope that we can answer some of them. So Angel, you started as CEO of NACAC in July. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. In July. So I am interested to know how what you're thinking, feeling, how that has felt coming into the role of CEO of NACAC at this particular time in terms of both race and COVID and, other things based on sort of your background and where you've come from. So I'm just kind of interested to know how you're feeling today and what you thought about sort of the last year, if you will.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. It's good to see you. And you're right, we have these conversations offline. So I was really excited about the fact that we could just have this candid conversation now with a bit of an audience and hopefully with some engagement. And I am sad we're not at a conference because, we love a conference. And actually, I don't know if you remember, but many years ago, I was a speaker at SACAC. And I will never forget the energy of SACAC. I've been to a lot of ACACs, but SACAC is something else, very special. So hopefully, Tyler, hopefully we could do this in person at some point in the future. Your question is interesting because I haven't had a lot of time to reflect. I'll be honest. I started in July and it has been a whirlwind. You know, a lot of people don't know, but the process for appointing a new CEO really was like a year long. And I think the first time the search firm reached out to me was October. So this was really like a long time. And never would I have imagined that, one, that I was going to sit in this chair, but two, that when I did, it was going to be in the midst of, I would say, 3 pandemics, because not just racial reckoning, not just COVID, but I would say a pretty serious financial crisis. And so leading organizations in the middle of financial crisis, especially organizations like NACAC that are so heavily dependent on in-person programming, that just takes a different kind of skill set, mindset, and will. But I will say it's also been very exciting. I am one of those, I'm an optimist by nature. I'm one of those believers in don't let a crisis go to waste. Think about what you can do in the crisis and use it as an opportunity for change. So while there's been a lot of challenges, I've also been really excited about the opportunities. And I've also been really excited about, I just feel like our members are ready, like NACAC members and SACAC members are ready for change. They're ready for a new direction. They're certainly vocal, and I really, really appreciate that. And you know, I think you remember I went on a listening tour when I first arrived. I called it my Zoom tour because it wasn't in person, obviously. But that's when I really got into understanding what members were really looking for and needed, and also started to get some history about the organization and affiliates, which, to be honest, I didn't really have, right, as someone who was not internal at NACAC. And then the other thing is just we've had a lot of pretty exciting wins, I would say. In terms of, for example, foundation grants that we applied for that we were able to receive that are going to like move NACAC and hopefully the profession in new and exciting directions. But also the fact that I just feel like everyone is really excited about the fact that as an organization, we're really pivoting and moving in new directions. I get a lot of emails from members who say, I'm feeling it. I feel that there's a new energy and a new direction. You know, I'll be the first to admit, I still have a lot to learn. You know, first year out as CEO of an association and sitting here in the Washington, D.C. area, realizing that, you know, we really are, NACAC is part of this larger ecosystem of higher education associations. And so I'm learning a lot about that. And the other thing I'll say is I was also really excited about the fact that our membership has grown so much. So we grew by 65% this year. And a lot of that has to do with a change in the membership model that came way before me. But what's exciting about that is that, you know, I feel like we're now a much larger village and have a much larger voice. And so I can't wait to see what we do with that voice. So lots going on.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely a lot going on. You talked a little bit, you touched on something that I want to talk a little bit about. You know, one of the things that I have found in some ways good, in some ways really difficult, is leading in the midst of such a strong era of social media, you know, where so many people can have so many opinions that are very public about what you are doing or are not doing, you know, well or not well. And I found that to be something that I think really pushes you forward as a leader in many ways, because you have to be very certain and very clear about what it is that you're doing and know why you're doing it. Because at any minute, you know, any person who may not have a lot of information about what you're doing may be able to, you know, criticize or attack that. How have you been able to navigate leading with such a strong social media presence out there? And I think that, you know, I think that is magnified with NACAC, because I feel like immediately preceding you, there seemed to be a lot of, you know, social media, you know, buzz out there about NACAC and, you know, things that maybe NACAC wasn't or was doing. So how have you been able to navigate that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and something you and I talk about offline a lot. Yeah. You know, because I will say it's hard. And I think leading in moments like these is extraordinarily difficult and complex. And viewing it from the outside and criticizing it is certainly much easier than sitting in the ring and really taking those punches, right? But at the same time, I think about it in a lot of different ways. Social media has given a voice to members and members of our community that sometimes felt like they didn't have a voice, right? And so it also is an interesting way for them to reach leadership in their organizations, to basically say, have you thought about this? We don't always agree on the approach. I'm not a huge fan of the approach where people attack and then they ask questions. I wish they would ask questions and then hold people accountable. But I do think it's important to hold people accountable. I will say, and Jonathan, I know you feel this way too, that in order to lead in these moments, you have to have really thick skin. And you also cannot take any of this stuff personally. I remind my staff here at NACAC, that one, we're not always going to get it right. And when we get it wrong, we have to change course. But that at the same time, there is no way that there's anything we could ever do that 22,000, actually 23,000 people are going to like, right? There is always going to be a different perspective, and there are always going to be people who disagree with what we do. And so you almost, to take on these positions now, you have to be comfortable in that kind of debate, and you have to also make sure that you don't take that personally. So I think the way that I have been able to really navigate it in this chair, but I would say also when I was in higher education, because I worked in institutions where I was trying to make a lot of change, and a lot of people in the organization and alumni were not happy about what I was doing and were very, very vocal on social media about it. So I think the key to success is remove yourself from it and remind yourself that you are not the role, right? That the role is a position and that you represent something much larger than yourself. So you should not take it personally. And the other thing is that I think when people are just wrong, you need to sort of call that out and say, actually, that's not true. Sometimes the best place to do that, though, is not on social media. So I will say that over the past year, there have been controversies about NACAC that showed up in several Facebook groups. And what I did is I would call people. I would pick up the phone and say, hey, I saw you posted that. And I just wanted to let you know that's not true. But I'm not going to go on and, end up being defensive, because sometimes those things don't really work. But I'm all about relationship development and trying to remind people that we're all human. Like, pick up the phone if you're doubting something we're doing, or if you think something we're doing is not good, and I'm happy to have the conversation. But it is tough. I'm wondering, how have you navigated it now that you can reflect as past president? Any lessons learned or lessons for Tyler, who's picking up the gavel?
I mean, I've learned a lot of things. The thing that I knew before now, but I think that I know at an even greater level of certainty, is that leading now is not for the faint of heart. Like, there are a lot of it just takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of time. And when you put all these things together, like, a large social media presence, like, making decisions, for example, you talked about the financial piece. I mean, we had to make a lot of financial decisions around, our largest revenue generator is our annual conference, which we had to cancel the year before, and this year we've thankfully been able to make that free of charge, but that was not free to the organization. And so what I will say is that I've learned, or am very certain about now, that leading during these times is not for the faint of heart. I think the other thing that I've really learned is, I think so many people see leadership or see the title president or see the title CEO and they think glamour, and there's all these, perks and glamour and, all those things. When the truth of the matter is that it's not all that glamorous, yeah. And it's exhausting. And, I would argue that people who lead in the right ways, from the right places, actually consider yourself last all the time. You know, like your feelings and how you feel about something is usually the last thing you consider. And so, you know, and even in this year, for example, you know, my whole presidency has been virtual. You know, like I never was in person at a conference or at a, you know, those sorts of things. And so I think, you know, what that has reinforced in me is that you really have to lead for the right reasons. You know, if you are leading for what you think are going to be the perks, and if you are leading for being in front of people and fanfare, those types of things, I think that those things will show pretty quickly. I think if you are leading for the right reasons and from the right place, I think that shows up pretty quickly as well. So I think just making certain that we're making decisions that are in the best interests of our organizations is the thing that I picked up really the most in this year, and that really, you know, you can't anticipate what's gonna come up. You know, like I remember being here at school. I tend to be an optimist, and so I remember being here at school. Our boss called us into a meeting at the beginning of March, all of senior staff, and said, "Oh, I think we're going to be out of school for 2 weeks for, you know, for this coronavirus." And I remember thinking, I don't know why people are making. I think people are just being, you know, dramatic about this, because that tends to be my approach to everything. Like people are just being dramatic. I never would have imagined, you know, that we would still be in the middle of this, and that we wouldn't have come back to school, you know, for the rest of that school year, you know, all of those things. So all that to say, like, you can't anticipate what's going to come up, and leadership never stops. Like, it always is ongoing. And what we've learned in this year is that there can be a lot of big things on top of each other, right? That need your attention. So you talked about 3 sort of things that you were dealing with: a financial crisis, you know, race, unrest, and COVID. I mean, you know, so and all of those things need your attention, right? And so that was the same with us. You know, there were multiple things needing our attention. And so I think you just have to do your best to really prioritize and figure out what is the best, you know, what does the organization need most, and how do you sort of prioritize that? I think the other thing I've learned, I would say, is the importance of having a good team around you. Because at the end of the day, one person, you can't do all the work. Like, you have to have, like, it's too much. And so you have to have a team of people around you who can help and support you. But I think you also have to have a group of people around you who are willing to, you know, say, look, I'm going to pick up this piece and do this. And this is my expertise in this area, you know, as well. And thankfully, you know, I had that in the SACAC board. But I would take that a step further, even in your personal life, having people who you can call on to say, hey, I'm going through this thing, or this is, you know, going on. What do you think about this? I'll give you a great example of that. When it was this summer, and I don't remember if you remember, there was a shooting of a Black man in a Wendy's parking lot here in the summer, and there was a lot of tension already happening, and that sort of happened on top of what was going on. I'd gone up to Blue Ridge with 2 friends to the mountains just to kind of get away because so much was going on. We couldn't really do much because it was COVID. And I remember getting some texts from people saying that the city of Atlanta was going to be on a curfew. And so I get back into town, and I could see, as I come back, I see all the protests, I see everything that's going on. Now, keep in mind, I was in Blue Ridge, which it was pretty calm, you know, very, you know, didn't look like Atlanta at all. And I immediately became pretty anxious about, you know, what was going on. And then I knew pretty quickly that there needed to be some statement from SACAC about, you know, what was happening. I remember feeling really, I sent a text or an email to the board and said, I know we need to say something, but I am really exhausted. Like, I'm exhausted as a Black man. And I know that we need to say something, but I don't know that I have the energy to write what it is to be said.
Right.
We have a wonderful communications team. And I said, I want y'all to, take a stab at it. They did, came back, did a great job. Called my friend, Jessica Sant, who is the board, my board advisor, presidential advisor. And I said, I know we need to say something. I asked the comms team, they came back with something really great, but I just feel like I'm, really exhausted. And she said to me, and this is underlying the importance of having people who sort of will call it out to you. She said, I know that you are exhausted, but I feel like I know you well enough to know that you will wake up the day after that statement goes out, you will wake up and regret not having said your words. And so I think you need to try to pull it together and use your words and say it. And I did. And that was, I feel like, one of the hardest things I had to do, but that was so true. And that I know that if I had not penned those words myself, that would have been a huge regret, I think, of the time of my presidency. So I think that, what I've also learned is it's really important to have people around you who know you and who will affirm you when you're right, but who will push you when they feel like you're going down a direction that may be counter to who you are.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared that story, because I know a lot of the people watching and young professionals who are thinking, maybe I'll throw my hat in the ring for these positions, or maybe I'll become the director or the VP. One of the things I've learned in these positions, very similar to the story you just shared, and especially this year, where I feel like every other day there is something that we need to speak out about, is that sometimes I do feel overwhelmed by the fact that people forget that you're a human being, and that you might, even as the leader of an organization, have your own emotions about this, or that you might, but what most people don't realize is that as events are happening, even though you're going through your own emotions, you actually have to immediately pivot, usually put those emotions on hold to, what does my organization need? What statement do I need to put out? Let's get the communications team on board, right? So it's this very interesting, complex way of compartmentalization, actually, in order to succeed. But I think your advice is right on, that you need your village, you need your people around you, that you can then go to and be yourself and say what you really want to say, and sort of let your guard down a little bit. But I think leading in these moments does mean that you do have to have a little bit of compartmentalization, and I use that word lightly to a certain extent, but that you often have to think, what does my organization need right now before what do I even need?
Yeah, because it's a difficult, sometimes it's a difficult, balance to find, because, there is Jonathan Ferrell, the person who may feel or think one thing, and then there is Jonathan Ferrell, the president of SACAC, who, has a totally different sort of role or way that he may need to lead. And sometimes those line up and sometimes those don't line up. And so it is a very sort of difficult dance to do. Sometimes I've found that it can be a difficult sort of dance to do.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is just, always sort of standing in your own truth. And even when you put things out there that are going to upset people, or that some people will disagree with, it's really important to just remember, as you said earlier, like, why is it that you took on these roles? Why is it that you're also standing for these particular issues? One thing I haven't said publicly, because I think it would shock people, but I'll share with you in SACAC, is I had put out a statement when the insurrection happened in January. I got so much hate mail from people across the country asking for me to step down, because they felt like I was anti-white, and I was anti-this, and I was anti-that. And that was a little surprising. I mean, I've gotten a lot of hate mail before about other things, but I was not expecting that because I didn't think it was controversial. So I also think it's really important, you know, when you step into leadership roles to realize actually anything you say is going to be controversial. Just sit with that and know that regardless of what you put out there, no matter how well intended it's going to be, someone is going to misinterpret or just view it through their lens. So it's interesting times we're living in.
Not hate mail.
Yeah, not hate mail. It exists. Hate mail, hate tweets.
I will say that I have, by and large, any statement that I've put out, I usually get from SACAC people positive feedback. So those who don't like what I'm saying,
that's because you're in the South and people are so lovely in the South, you know, just there's a lot of love.
Are you saying they're like, are they blessing my heart? Is that
they're blessing your heart? There's a lot of love. That's why I love Southerners.
I know, right? Yeah, so by and large.
Could I change gears a little bit?
You can.
I know we probably have some questions coming up, but you know, I wanted to share something that was on my mind about the profession that I've been thinking about, and actually I just wrote an article about it, and hopefully we'll start to float it around soon. But you know, one of the things that has concerned me since I have taken this chair is, you know, I get a lot of phone calls from people in the profession, and as you know, I was in it for 22 years before sitting in this chair, so I know a lot of people in the field. And I'll be honest, I'm really concerned about how we are going to inspire people to stay in this work. I hear a lot, and I'm literally quoting, there is not a lot of joy left in the work, you know, and particularly from enrollment officers and admissions people on the higher ed side, you know, that the kind of pressures that they are facing, that they sometimes wake up and say, you know, this isn't why I got into this work, you know, to bring in revenue for my institutions and balance budgets and so on and so forth. So, you know, I'm wondering, have you been giving that some thought? Do you get phone calls like that as well? And how do we inspire, you know, the next generation? You know, you and I have decided to make it a career and stay in it. You know, and to make this our calling. But I also know when I was on a campus and the, you know, 23, 24, 25-year-olds who were in my office who were pretty new, a lot of them would say, you know, we really admire what you do, but we don't know how you do it. And we can't imagine working at that pace or being under that kind of pressure and scrutiny. What do you say to that?
You know, I think first, I think to that, you know, I don't know how you do it. I think we have to show them, you know, how we do it. You know, I think that when I think about, you know, how might we inspire people to stay in the profession, I really do think that it is through mentorship. I really do think that it has to be, I think it really has to be more micro than macro. I mean, I think it, you know, when I think about the reasons, because there were certainly points in time in my own profession that I thought, you know, I don't know, I'm not really making a lot of money. I'm being, you know, on the road. I'm just kind of going. But at each one of those times, like I could turn to someone and say, hey, I'm really feeling this way. Tell me more about this, you know, or, you know, tell me how you got to where you were. So I really think that we have to, as people who have been in the profession some time, I think there is some, we need to take some ownership, I think, as leaders in the profession, to tap people who we see in the profession who we can sort of identify as, I guess we could call them rising stars, or people who are really doing that work, you know, to really, and I think that we have far too long waited for, you know, those people to tap us and say, hey, I want you to be a mentor. I think it is time for us to tap those people and say, hey, I want to be your mentor. I want to be helpful to you because I see something in you that I think would be beneficial to this profession for the long term. So that's one of the things I have tried to start doing, you know, lately. here's an example of that. I won't call out a name, but here's an example of I think some of the kinds of things we can do. There was a person who I actually respect and admire very much, who was applying for jobs in a search that I had. At the end of that search, turned out that person didn't land the role, but not because that person did anything wrong. In fact, it was just a really tough pool. What I then said to that person was, look, I you can accept this or not, and I know how this may feel, but though it didn't work here, I would like to help you land at the next spot. So if you'll stay in contact, can we continue to stay in contact as you apply to other places? Let me still be able to call and talk to those people. Let me share those sorts of great things, because it just didn't work here for a particular reason. But I think that you should land and will land in a great place, and I want to be able to help you to do that. So I think doing things like that are often, that at that point, that was not going to help my institution or help me, in my office. But I saw that as a way to continue to help someone who I think is a complete rock star, and is someone the kind of person we'd want to have in this profession long term. So I would, I guess what I would say is I want to put a call out to those of us who are, veterans, as we'd say in this profession, to reach out to those folks who are newer and say, I see something in you, and how can I help keep you in the profession? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And, imagine if every single one of us in the profession tapped one person on the shoulder.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that you are now paying it forward in extraordinary ways. And honestly, that's the way that I sort of came up in the profession, right? And people sort of tapping me on the shoulder and said, would you consider this? Have you thought of this?
For sure.
I will say I am inspired, because when I looked at the data about who were the majority of people that joined new as NACAC members this year, with that 65% growth, it was majority younger professionals. And it was because they now, admission offices or high school offices could add more people to their roster. And traditionally, it was usually the more experienced people or, directors that ended up as members. But now we have younger members. And so I really see, the role of NACAC is trying to inspire that next generation. And you may have seen an announcement that we're going to be rolling out this summer, a new certificate program for admission counselors, and trying to create a community. But also, one of the things I've been thinking about and talking to foundations about is how to support also chief enrollment officers. That is a very, very difficult role, right? And as you sort of become a director and up, and usually that you land in this space where you're now reporting to presidents and trustees and dealing with pressures you really were not prepared to, and would love to see NACAC playing a role in supporting those, and also bringing presidents, trustees, and enrollment officers together to sort of plan for success. Because, I often hear, oh, my president doesn't get it, or, my board doesn't necessarily get it. And I think that does lend itself to some of the job dissatisfaction or the pressure that people are feeling. So, I've been thinking a lot about the next generation. You may have seen I've been doing these next gen happy hours with admission counselors. I did one for secondary school counselors. Tomorrow, I think I'm doing one for independent educational consultants. So people who are brand new to the field, to just listen and hear, you're the next generation. How can we serve you? Because, NACAC has to remain really relevant. And one of the things I was concerned about is that we weren't really being intentional about reaching out to that younger generation and saying, you are part of this family, and we are your professional home. And we hope you start with us when you're right out of college, and that you stay with us through the rest of your career. But I think you're right. I mean, I think the reason most of us stayed in this work and get through the hard times is because of the people, right? The fact that I can call you and have a conversation like this, or, so many mentors that I have in the field. It's important to continue that legacy.
Yeah. So I'm going to turn and shift a little bit and ask you, a different question. So leading in, particularly in the pandemic that has, let's call it COVID specific, that has really caused some social distance in terms of us being together, and has really impacted the way we might, do our jobs in the day to day. What are some things that you feel like you are excited that will come back after COVID? And what are some things that maybe you've adopted as a leader that you've learned that you hope will stick around after COVID?
Oh, that's a good one. And I'm going to turn that back on you too. I want to hear what you have to say about that. So top of mind right now for me, and again, all of you who started jobs during COVID, my heart, bless your hearts, is all I have to say. But here's what's top of mind for me. We're actually going through this at NACAC right now. I have not met the majority of my staff. I am sitting here physically in the NACAC office. We have a lovely library behind me. But there are staff members who left here in March of 2020 and have never been back. What I have learned through that experience is that we certainly can pivot, we can innovate together under crisis, but there are things that will be lost when we are not in person. I think the building of trust is very difficult to do in a virtual environment because we're not walking down the hallway talking to each other, really feeling each other's vibe. I think, and I've been doing a lot of reading about this in Harvard Business Review and other research papers around the fact that being remote makes it more difficult to get an organization to the creative and innovative stage. Because again, a lot of that sort of connection that you have in an office is very difficult. So, what I think is no longer the case, at least in the NACAC space, and by the way, in the association space, because I've been talking to a lot of CEOs of associations here in DC, this whole notion of like, you have to be in the office every day, 9 to 5 and clock in and clock out, like that is gone, at least in our world.
Right.
And we're thinking more of a hybrid environment where you would come in certain days a week, meet with teams, collaborate, but then do some of your concentration work remotely. So I'm excited about that because that's different, right? That's a different model. But what I can't wait to come back, to be honest, is convening, right? And not just because that's what NACAC does, but the energy, the trust building that happens even when we get together at a conference. I think if you follow a lot of social media, there's been so much tension in the past year, and a lot of it has to do with what's happening in the world. But I'm also really a strong believer that a lot of it is because we're not together. I feel like people will say things on social media that they wouldn't say if they were sitting next to me at a conference, right? That kind of trust building is so important. So I really, really miss that. And I can't wait for that to come back. But I think the workplace is going to change the way we do our work. And I'm actually quite excited about that.
That's cool. Yeah, I would definitely say the thing that I'm most, excited to come back is, I think similar to you, is just the being in person as it relates to SACAC for sure. And even NACAC conference, that gathering, I am very much an extrovert. And so I get, I'm fueled by people. And that is also the time where, a NACAC conference or a SACAC conference is the time that I see, the one time a year I see some people. And so I certainly miss that, and I'm excited to get that back. I think the thing though that I hope will stay around is, I think that we have learned to be more connected in absence, if that makes sense. I think that I see that with my, with my family. We have connected more on Zoom or more, with friends of mine who have had like virtual happy hours and those sorts of things. And I think that we, in our actual, let's call it, normal life, we get so busy, just go, and we don't connect with people as we should. And I feel like I feel like I've done a better job of that, making time to connect to people who I wouldn't connect with as often during this time. So I do hope that part, that I will stick to that as we move back, to our sort of regular way of doing things. I hope that we will still find ways to stop and connect with folks that we should.
And actually, I did forget one thing that I wanted to mention before. I'm sure we're moving to Q&A soon. Is the one thing that I hope that doesn't leave is that I do think we've been able to understand each other and realize that we are humans outside of work, because everyone's working from home, right? So it's something to say that your colleague is a mom, but it is very different for her to zoom in with her child crawling all over her and, gathering the attention, and you realizing, wow, that is so difficult to balance, right? Or, all the other things that people have going on in their lives. I would even use this example before I left Trinity, which was the institution I was at before I came to NACAC. I actually reached out to a lot of the students that I mentored, on campus. And I will tell you, and a lot of them were first-gen low-income students. And, I said, can we do a FaceTime? I just want to make sure you're doing okay. So many of them, where they were FaceTiming from, right? Like the bathroom, because this is the only place that I have in my home at work, that it just reminds us of our humanity. And I really hope that doesn't go away, that just because we start coming back to an office that, we only see people through the lens of their work, but also like you are a complex human being with a lot going on outside of this space, right? So I hope that continues too. I really do.
I agree with that. Okay, so we are getting close. So Diana, I think you are going to feed us some questions if there are any questions out there.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Here's a question. In a time like this, when there are no precedents, there's no handbook, who has inspired you, or who or what have you looked to keep going, to make decisions?
Oh, that's a good. You want to start or you want me to?
Go for it. You start.
I would say, what I've really drawn a lot of inspiration from, for me, are people who are doing the same work as me. So for example, I've become really, obviously the country is broken up into affiliates, and I'm in a group of all the other presidents of affiliates. And so we connect all the time. I obviously talk to a lot of other directors of college counseling who are doing this work also. So I have gained a lot of ideas and inspiration just by talking and having conversations with folks who are doing very similar jobs to me, but are doing, are taking that in different ways, right? And so sometimes hearing what they're doing says, oh, well, that may not work exactly like they did it, but that idea could work to help, do something in a different way. And so I've really gained a lot of ideas and inspiration from that. Now, the other one is a little more maybe hokey, but it is who I am. It's Oprah, because I just am obsessed with Oprah. And so,
yes.
I kind of.
I was going to say Oprah. That's not fair.
I mean, I turned to Mama O for all things.
She always has an answer.
Always has an answer. Yes. I listened to a lot of her, just like interviews and insights on a lot of things, just because. So, and I would say, that is, that's my person, but I would say, find who your person is that really just inspires you, and you really feel like you connect with sort of their ideas and their thoughts, what thought leaders sort of really inspire you, and really tune into that. So that would be my thing. Angel?
Yeah, so besides Super Soul Sunday, I guess, so I would say I've been very fortunate. I have been welcomed with open arms, with by a lot of CEOs who run national higher education associations. It is such a warm and welcoming community. I knew nothing about it. But so I've had a lot of mentorship of people who said, if you have any questions about anything, feel free, give a ring. And we've been getting together on Zoom. So that's been actually really helpful. And the other thing that I would say is I've been watching college presidents a lot for inspiration, because I think it is one of the hardest jobs in America right now. Because talk about a constituency where you could never win, regardless of what you put out there. And, I worked for an amazing college president before I came to Trinity. And so she inspires, or when I left Trinity, so she inspires me a lot. But I've been watching, what presidents are doing, like how are they communicating with their constituencies? How are they handling the controversies? And so that, to a certain extent, I'm learning from some of their lessons, but I'm also being inspired by some of the ways that even they're just communicating with their communities.
Yeah, I would also say, I know we got another question, but I would say turn the negative off as much as you can. Be really thoughtful about what you're gonna ingest, what kind of information you're gonna ingest into your body as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, speaking of ingesting, are there books or podcasts that are engaging you right now? Or are there others you would recommend to members from your prior reading or listening?
You go first, Angel.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of leadership reading this year, just because I feel like that also inspires me. So I have spent the money on the expensive Harvard Business Review magazine subscription, but also I've shared this actually with a couple of members of the Affiliate Presidents Council, that I like reading books about leaders who've been really, really successful. And one of my favorite ones recently was Bob Iger's book. He just stepped down as the CEO of Disney, but he talked about writing. He opens his book with a scene of him about to go give a speech, and his assistant whispers in his ear that somebody at Disney, a child, had been killed by an alligator, and how do you deal with that crisis, right? And so, I just love learning lessons from leaders who've had to deal with really, really big things. So that book has been top of mind for me as well. And the other thing I will say is I like reading things like Brene Brown and folks who are just going to teach me a little bit about self-care, which I'm not always the best at. And so, I try to make sure that I incorporate that into my reading as well. But check out Brene Brown; she's really good.
Yeah, she is really awesome. I read from her from time to time. And to be honest, I have opted for my podcast and that sort of thing, because I feel like I have to work really hard. I have to work really hard at work-life balance. I feel like I'm wired to just do work. And I've made it really big strides in making that balance happen. So for my podcast and those sorts of things, I've just opted to listen to really fun things rather than, the work stuff. I did do just take an interesting 8-week class called the Creative Insight Journey, which was it's a Stanford, that's where it was born, but I took it through a different organization. But it was really cool because it was just designed to really give you tools to sort of navigate your kind of obstacles in your life, and they'll give you sort of different tools and insights around that. So it was a nice way to just, I think, dig deeper into self.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we had a member ask if you, Angel, could provide expert insight on how NACAC might be able to guide SACAC to be more inclusive and welcoming of the diverse voices within our organization.
Wow. Okay. Expert is when you lead with the word expert, that's a lot of pressure. I'm not sure that I'm an expert. But I have to say, I think I wouldn't necessarily phrase it as NACAC leading SACAC, but that I think we are all, as an organization affiliate, SACAC obviously being included, there's 23 affiliates across the country and our international. We're all sort of working on that and building that together right now. I think NACAC is certainly being very intentional on trying to lead efforts, for example, the development of our Anti-Racist Institute and programming, not just here internally. We're doing a lot of work internally with our teams so that it can sort of be magnified across the membership, but also really trying to provide professional development and leadership opportunities for all of the affiliate presidents. So I think a lot of the influence that NACAC has will be through two very specific groups, which I'm excited to be working more closely with in the next year. The folks like Jonathan and Tyler, who are part of the Affiliate Presidents Council, but also the special interest groups, which I think is sort of a little bit of an understated, powerful group of individuals who lead communities. So we are actually working very closely with the leaders of a lot of the special interest groups, especially the ones that are primarily focusing on BIPOC communities, to think about like, how does not only NACAC become more diverse and inclusive, but also how do we work with the affiliates to make sure that that is also happening as well. So I do think it's a reciprocal relationship that we're still working on, to be honest. And I'm sure Jonathan can attest to this. It's messy, it's murky, because you're talking about 23 independent organizations, and then there's NACAC, the mothership, really trying to work together and decide what does the future look like. But very, very important work that we're rolling our sleeves up to do.
Nice.
Okay, I think we have one last question, or time for one more.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Someone commented, I've learned important practical lessons from my grandparents. My paternal grandfather often referenced having mother wit. What are some of the important words of wisdom you've received from your elders that you could share with us?
Ooh. I love that. What would Oprah say, Jonathan? I'm happy to start because I'll give you two that are sort of profession related, because I know a lot of you are trying to think about how you balance your lives with the profession. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got, and I pass it on to every young person that I meet in this profession, is choose your bosses wisely, because your bosses can make or break your professional experience and your professional journey moving forward. I have just been so fortunate. I have had amazing bosses who wanted to invest in me, who wanted to, make sure that I had a journey and a professional development plan. Next time you're applying for a job, remember that you are interviewing those people as much as they are interviewing you, because you are really entering into a relationship. So I would say that. And then the next one does come from Oprah, Jonathan, and I heard her talk about this in the podcast. And I am still learning this and trying to incorporate it, because I am a yes person. So people ask me, can you speak at this? Can you do this? And I'm like, sure, yes, happy to. But for everything that you say yes to, you are saying no to something else in your life. And so early in your career, it's probably good to say yes to a lot of things, right? Because that's how you're going to get opportunities. So when I was young, I was like, yes, I'll volunteer for that committee. Yes, I'll do this. What I'm realizing now at this phase of my career, that my success is dependent on saying no more. Because if I say yes to everything, I'll be good at nothing. So those are the two pieces of advice for me.
I would definitely say, I can remember at any point of leaving my, I lived like a mile down the road from my grandparents. So I was kind of raised by both my parents and my grandparents. I spent, equal amount of time in both. And I can remember my grandmother, when I would leave her house going anywhere, if I was going to school, if I was going to church, if I was going to practice, going to anything, as I would leave, she'd always say, remember who you are. And that was really her, way of saying, like, you represent the family when you leave. So whatever you go out and do, you need to make sure you remember who you are. But I've actually taken that in my life, in leadership, and, wherever I am. And it is that, that when I speak as when I've spoken as SACAC president, when I am walking to Pace Academy, to work, when I, whatever I'm doing, it is always, I always can hear that voice to say, remember who you are, and I think that when you do that, even when people aren't going to always agree with you, and there might be people on social media, attacking you, or people doing this and this and that, at the end of the day, as long as you remember who you are, those things don't throw you off track. So I would say that has probably been the biggest thing that I've gotten from like maternal or, wisdom that I carry with me always.
Well, great words of wisdom from you both. And we appreciated the opportunity to sit here and listen to you chat with one another. There were lots more questions that came in. I am so sorry if we did not have a chance to get to those questions. We probably could have sat here and chatted with y'all all afternoon. So, but there are other things to get to. But again, Jonathan, Angel, we truly appreciate your time today. We are grateful that you are in your positions for such a time as this. Y'all have to get into the down and dirty. That takes a lot of energy and effort and time, and a strong ability to stretch and flex and pivot. Yesterday, I came across a quote I actually sent to Jonathan this morning, but it said, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. So I would challenge all of you watching to do those precise things. Looking ahead in the conference, you have a break until our Block E sessions, which will begin at 11:30 Eastern. So you'll have about a 15-minute break. The Block F sessions will follow shortly after that at 12:45 Eastern. And then our day is going to end with 2 different block sessions of state meetings. So during that time, if your state is meeting, please join with your colleagues. This will give you the opportunity to network some, get to know other people who are working within your home state, and collaborate with them as well. We thank you for being here. We thank you for showing up. Please enjoy the remainder of this virtual conference. We will be following up, as Anita mentioned in this morning session, after the conference closes, as to when the recordings of sessions will become available, because we do want you to be able to view that which you missed and have interest in watching. Thank you, and we'll see you back in a few minutes for sessions.
Bye, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.